A warm welcome. We are back. We had some technical challenges, but we hope that everything's going to be beautiful from now on. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a great show. And for those of you who have checked out the Ponytail story, we're getting some rave reviews about the collection that is on Hair Designer TV. If you haven't had a chance, do check it out. And for the members of Hairdressers Create, yes, you do get a special promotion. So if you're not a member of Hairdressers Create, now's your chance to join. You can join for free. And also a warm welcome to our friends at Hair Designer TV. Today is very, very special. I have the fabulous Nicholas French. But not only do I have this amazing man, I also have with us his incredible father. Yes, through incredible film footage, we can go back and see the magical work of this great man. So today we're going to explore the 1940s and the 50s. And the 40s is a really special time for me. I always loved it. I think redheads were popular then, so maybe that's why. But anyway, we're going to explore that. Not only are we going to go through some incredible film footage and imagery that much of it I'm sure you have never seen before, we're also going to dive into Nicholas French's head and discover the original creations, because isn't it genius when something's done for the very first time and it creates this huge trend? And isn't it fascinating to go inside the mind and figure out the creative genius who thought up those ideas? So that's what this show is about today, and we're going to demonstrate for you some beautiful 40s and 50s hairstyles, but we're going to bring them up to date. So I'm going to show you some hair sewing, and I know that Nicholas has prepared some amazing mannequins to share with you his magic and so on. So I hope that you are ready for an exciting journey. Wherever you are around the world, grab a cocktail, regardless of the time, just grab a cocktail, and we're going to have a lot of fun. Rosemary, my artistic team member, is in the chat room, so she will be taking questions. And at the end of the show, we will stay on to actually talk to you and find out any questions that you may have. So are you ready? Well, let's go through this wonderful journey of the 40s and the 50s.
Another beauty parlor, and a man who can create a bit of beauty out of tissue paper and candle grease. The things people do. Try it. It's not as easy as it looks, painting with melted candle wax. This sculptor sometimes starts with figures made from screwed-up newspaper, glued and molded. But it isn't altogether art for art's sake. The artist is Freddie French, a well-known hairstylist, and the waxy busts he's making are display models for a salon in London's West End. It's with these models that he experiments in the elaborate hairdos he's always dreaming up. You see these startling figures in the window, and you wonder if the man who made them can create a bit of beauty out of your hair. And that generates the idea.
Wow. I'm unworthy. I'm unworthy. Nicholas, you are incredible, just like your father. And I just find it amazing that your father did these incredible sculptures and that you are sculpting hair. You're just a genius.
Well, you know, it's funny, Viv, because we know me for many years. It's really been, my father was the reason I fell in love with hair, you know, and fell in love with the art of creativity, and also he gave me the courage to be, to a degree, fearless in what I do, you know, and I think that's one of the most important things. So you discover new ways of doing hair, new shapes, new boundaries to break, really. And I think that's what Freddie was all about. And he didn't, you know, he passed away feeling very depressed about it. He'd done nothing in life, which is ridiculous. He really broke the mold of what we are today as professional hairdressers. He was a unique person. So it's fantastic you're going to salute him here.
Yes, and absolutely. And I think what's amazing is to actually go inside the mind of this brilliant man and hear your story as the son. So tell me, what was his salon like?
What was his family like? Did you say?
His salon. What was his
salons? Oh my God! Yeah, his salons were very. You know, everything then was very, very disciplined. You know, I remember when I left school in 1965. I was about almost 16, and I went into his salon for a couple of years to be an apprentice. And my job basically was to assist as much as I could anywhere and learn at night. And before the salon opened up at 9:30, all the assistants who were girls had to have their hair done by their stylist. They were assisting to bring them, you know, so they looked very fresh and very modern and fabulous. And all their nails were inspected. They wore crisp white uniforms with their name on the side, you know, Miss Vivian or whatever. And, you know, they had to be really up to the mark. So the whole idea of a hair salon was theatre. It was a show. It was opulence. It was after the Second World War and all the doom and despair. You know, women wanted to be pampered. They wanted to feel very special. And Dad was a supplier of this. You know, in Paris, it was the Carita sisters. In London, it was Freddie French of London. And so they created this amazing atmosphere. So you would save up your, you know, all your wages to go if you're a worker, or you know, if you would have an account with French of London if you were a socialite. And that was a kind of atmosphere. You know, they had chefs, they had waiters, they had doormen, they had bellmen, they had everything there. So everything was done for the, you know, for the client. That was so when she went out on air, you know, it was amazing.
So Nicholas, how was it? How many salons did your father have? Because I know he built an empire.
Well, the height of his career, he had 27 salons, and he had 8 on ships, 6 hotels, 5 department stores, and the rest of it was really freestanding salons. And then he had a factory that made professional hair products, from color to perms to shampoos to everything else. You know, in fact, you know, which this is a great ad. And what it was really, you see, the drawings were very essential because Dad didn't want to do something that was obvious. You know, it was like I had a recent opportunity to work for Emilia Pucci, which was brilliant in Art Basel in Miami. And they said, well, semi-tear sheets. They're all very young people at LMVR, whatever the name of the place is, you know, the big group. And I said, no, there's no tear sheets. It's brand new. We have to do drawings. And so Dad was very much in the ilk of do drawings and inspire the client, do sculptures in the windows of the salon. So when you went in for the consultation, it was all fresh, it was all new, and it was all about French of London. It wasn't about, oh, I want my hair to look like this picture. It was like the tendencies. They used to call them tendencies in those days. And these are great pictures of Freddie and Monica in their heyday in the 50s. You know, all their clothes were handmade. I don't know where my dad got his taste from, because he could only, you know, he could read, but he couldn't really write very well. And he came from nothing. He had his voice changed by an elocutionist, the same one that Vidal Sassoon later used. My dad had recommended her. And so their lives were very sort of into Europe, driving around Europe in a fabulous stretch limousine with a chauffeur. And, you know, Dad visiting all these famous hairdressing friends like Alexandra of Paris and everybody else. So it's a great, you know, genre. It's a great group of people who really wanted to take hairdressing to a different place, which I think is
so tell us a funny story about when your father went for his elocution lesson, because Vidal was there as well, wasn't he?
No, he was no. Vidal came when he was 17 for a job in Curzon Place, which is off Curzon Street, where my dad's big glamorous salon was. And my dad said, Vidal, you're very, very, very talented. You're very young. He said, but you will not do hair the French of London system. You have too many of your own ideas, right? So he said, I think you're great, and I hope we'll be friends for life, but you're not for us, because you're not going to do the French of London hairbrushing technique, French of London cutting technique, all that kind of stuff. So he said, but this is an address and a name of a person at the Old Vic in London who will teach you how to speak the English that clients will accept you, because otherwise rich women will not accept you if you have an East End Cockney voice. And my dad had one. He went to this woman, changed her voice. A bit like my old-fashioned English voice, because that's what was popular in those days. I went to a posh school, but that's another story. And my dad sent me there because he wanted me to be able to converse with kings and queens, So that was his concept. So it's a fascinating story. And they were friends for the whole of their lives, Vidal and my dad. Very different people, very different, But
So tell us about the training, because we're going to look at some of your father's images, but tell us about the training when you were at your father's salon.
Well, the training was very, very strict. You went to the school night 5 nights a week. And you were trained by the hairdressers. The stylist would stay behind on one night, one the other night, and they would train you in the different aspects of hairdressing, from the foundational skills right the way through, to having a creative mind. But it was all about, in my dad's place, the French of London techniques of doing hair, which was fascinating, which we'll show you a bit later, actually, the way they set hair in the 50s. I've done an original 50s set here. And then, of course, I left, my dad after a couple of years after my apprenticeship, and I went to Vidal Sassoon's, and I just did drawings. I couldn't really do hair because I wanted to investigate new ways of doing hair, new ways of looking at hairdressing, and to really sort of bring back to my dad's business something fresh and new, because his time was slowly finishing and Vidal's time was slowly beginning. So I want to be part of the new sort of, the new people that were coming up. This is a great picture here. This is when I was 10 years old. My dad, we went shopping. We went to an antique store, and it was Polly died in 1888, and she was inside. There was a parrot inside that glass dome. My dad bought it for 30 shillings, and I had to carry it home. And then he said, next Wednesday, you come to the studio, I'm going to photograph this. I said, what are you talking about? And I went there, I went to the studio, Polly had gone, and I just saw this beautiful girl with all her hair beautifully done. It was a fantastic day for me. And that's when I started to fall in love with the ideas. My dad had a great technique of finding ideas outside hairdressing. He could bring back into the industry, photograph it, and make people aware of how important hairdressing was. Because in those days, hairdressers were servants. They weren't people to be recognized like great couture designers. They were just, they're just a hairdresser,
Yeah, well, let's take a look down memory lane, and we're going to explore the 1940s and the 1950s. The 1940s fashions were creations born of necessity and social change. The Second World War brought the fashionable jet-set lifestyle to an abrupt halt. 1939 set the image that would stay throughout the war years: deprivation and restriction, a de-emphasis on fashion, and vanity taking second place to necessity. The war years prompted women to be resourceful. Magazines told women to convert blankets into coats. For the first time, hats were unattainable, and women grew their long hair and wore turbans and embroidered snoods to keep it tidy. Hair became a sexual point during this time. The American lifestyle had not been so harshly affected by the war. It was still the land of plenty. The fashion industry was at a standstill throughout Europe, so it was inevitable that everyone looked to America. Hollywood created an escape from the harsh reality of war through the world of fantasy, influencing fashion. Celebrities became the pin-up girls for the men away at war. After the great loss of life during World War II, the focus was to rebuild family life. This era would become known as the baby boomers. After the depression of the war, there was a yearning to return to glamour. perfect timing for Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield, who epitomized the big, blonde, busty look. The women of the 50s continued developing a full-figure look. Full bust, considered vulgar in the 20s and 30s, became desirable. The new motto was, the bigger, the better. The 50s gave birth to the teenager. For the first time, fashion was available for the youth. The music industry caught on quickly, recognizing the enormous potential of teenagers as a market. Elvis Presley, jitterbugging, and jukeboxes rocked the fashionable establishments, inspiring the fashion world. Hairstyles became very elaborate affairs. Sprays and rollers were used to create fantastic back-combed beehives. The entire fashion image was a very artificial look. That's such a cool story. So, Nick, let's talk about the 40s. How was the hair set in this period of time?
The 40s, well, everything was, it's interesting. My dad had a salon. His first salon opened up in London, 1934. And then 1938, he had to go to war, and he was in the Royal Air Force, and he rented his salon out. So he didn't come back to 1947, Viv. But the great thing was that he was trying to do something different. And so when he set the hair in the 1930s, late 30s, everything was set with like waves on the top and then pinkos underneath. So basically, he started setting hair in big sections on top with pins, hair pins, not clips, hair pins, and then smaller ones underneath. And that continued really to the 40s, and you've got some great pictures here. And everything really in the 40s in the war was really rolled. People didn't have time to do stuff. And that's why you saw these marvelous hairstyles and stuff in the rolled 40s hairstyles, In fact, I might have one just sitting around here to show you the sort of silhouettes of what happened in the 40s. I don't know if you can see in my little window here. I've got the back of this. Yeah, here we go. I've got the sides here, the front. Where are we going? The other way. Hang on. Let's go. Yeah. So the front was very much like a very flat in the front. Let me get her straightened out. She's a bit. Actually, had a few drinks. I think she's been waiting for stuff. And let's put it on here. Hang on. That's better. So you can see how it was very much flat here, and then it started to roll, and then we went up to the back, which was rather asymmetric, which is very Vivian McKendry. And then the back was more or less like a lovely ponytail. And then they used to do things at the back of the nape of the neck, because everything really was exit dresses. So they had a sort of naked back, and then you had these sort of coifs going on. Now, the way they set their hair, which is quite interesting, and I haven't done one for 150 years, but the way they set their hair was with 3 pins. And this is an original sort of late 40s, early 50s set. And it was 3 hairpins. You put a hairpin this way, put a hairpin through the top, it was 3 hairpins through the side. So that's how you sort of set their hair. And then the top in the 30s is a finger weight, but in the 40s it's more big, big sort of like curls. So it's like looser on the top and then tighter at the bottom. And that's right, you've got beautiful pictures there to prove it. But I actually set this in the same ilk. And I'm in Palm Springs, California, so I went outside for 5 minutes and she was drying about 4. But it gives you an idea of the silhouettes. And that's why you see the silhouettes being closer to the top and fuller at the sides. And even in the 40s to the 50s, it really, not until the 60s were people exploding hair up into something different. And, it got into the end. And in fact, geometric haircuts did not come in until the late 60s. Mm-hmm. I've got pictures of Vidal backcombing hair, and razor cutting hair. I was there when he did a razor cut, and he said, I never did a haircut with a razor at his 80th birthday. And I was there. And I said, yes, you did. I was handing the razor up to you. He said, no, you didn't. I said, of course I didn't, but I did. So, it's all that wonderful real stuff. And he was such a showman.
Yes.
And I remember he would use anything to get their hair done. I removed the hairlines in the 60s for Vidal before he cut their hair. Can you imagine? With capillary cream. And these women, it's terrible, it stings like crazy, and your hairline would just drop on the floor, and an ice cream spatula with wood on it, and I dipped it into the capillary cream. Every time I dabbed on, they go, ew, 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 well, like that. And their hair would fall off, so Vidal would come along, and he would cut these amazing shapes with great panache. And he was one of the greatest showmans. There are two showmans, Vidal Sassoon and Raymond. My dad didn't like being a showman. He's very shy like that. But Raymond was like an amazing showman. And Vidal worked with him, and he got it from him. But Vidal was actually amazing live when he cut hair. It was theatre.
Yeah.
The theatre my dad created in the sort of 50s was really recreated by Vidal and tuned down in the 60s. So you were still working a theatrical background.
So we're going to show our friends some of those pictures. But first of all, I would love to know, with our friends out there, how many of you love retro? And are you relating to any of these hairstyles? Can you think of ways you could recreate these looks? Because they're so special. So this is a hairstyle that I'm going to recreate for you today. And I actually did this collection in Paris. So I'm going to take you through this 1940s silhouette, which is really quite lovely. And then we're going to go into something a little bit more special. But before we go into the 50s, take a look at this footage, because I think it is absolutely amazing.
It's the touch of an expert who knows all the answers, and some of the secrets as well. And this is the hairstyle designed for the outdoor girl who wants to make a splash without spoiling a wave. She's off to put the idea to the test. She's graceful and trusting as she takes to the water. Too trusting, too late, for the water's cool but wet. Up for a breather, and our waves still ripple. She's halfway through test one, and she's keeping her misgivings well under. It's a gallant performance, for she knows in her heart that although success may set the seal, failure will seal her set. Now she rises, a mermaid in quest of an answer, and test two opens with some vigorous headwork. Who would be a mermaid fair, singing alone, drying her hair? A final touch, and it's success by a hair's breadth. A tight perm followed by a close crop. That's the secret of the outdoor girl's latest, and they call it the mermaid crop.
So, Nicholas, that was very revolutionary to have wash and wear hair back in that period of time. Tell us a little bit more about that.
That was the first time it was ever really seen. And what Dad did, because they didn't have large perm rods, so what they did, Dad used small perm rods on long hair, cut off all the client's hair, and then you had that lift at the roots remaining, which was fantastic. And so that's how he created that haircut. And it's like, that was 1953, I think. So it's the first time we really saw wash and wear hair anywhere in the world. And it was amazing. And that's how he discovered things. You know, sometimes you have to go through bad things to find good things. And that's where he went through rather a bad perm on long hair. And then he cut it short. But cleverly in his you know, when clients read about him, Mr. French only undertakes restyles, so whatever he did had to be fresh and new. And then he passed on his clients to other stylists, so he could experiment and do great things. Like this picture, this is his first Vogue cover in 1951. And Dad was very upset in the 50s that it was all hats and white gloves. So he decided, in his wisdom, to create and design hats. So in his boutiques, which he had in his hair salons, he had hats so you could see hair. And I thought that was brilliant, because that's one of his hats he designed. And then he did the chignon, you know, at the back of the head. And that Princess Grace, in fact, you know, goodness gracious, 4,000 years ago, I did Princess Grace's mother's hair when I was at my dad's salon. And I said, where's Princess Grace? And I think your dad's messing around with her hair somewhere. you know. But you know, that's very indicative of that period, you know, how beautiful the hair was, and it was all in the products. The products were very different. You see, you didn't have the products you have now. You know, my dad brought mousse out as one of the first people to do it, and that was the late 60s, early 70s. Before that, it was all like it was like nasty 100% alcohol setting lotions, so the hair was very crispy. So it's quite. So the set was a set. It was not going to change from the set. So you had to be a perfect setter, you know. And this is, I haven't done this for a long time, but this is just totally pin curls that I've set this in, and nothing but tiny, tiny pins, just 3 of them like that.
So I can't wait to see what you're going to do with this style. So let's talk about some of these, the silhouette of the 50s, because we went from this particular look here, where you can see that short hair, and then we go into some architecture, which this is your father's work.
Yeah, so that was a bit over the top.
Yeah, and then
the left-hand picture here, looking at it, that's Isabel Babianska, who was a European model that my dad worked on. And he purposely left the hair very untidy and very not quite what was expected, because he wanted to try and break the barriers. But that was all set. He never used irons on the hair at all. That was all just set for live. Like, I love the picture on the right of Marilyn Monroe. She was amazing. And I loved her hair and everything. And that was the beginning really of, you know, it's rather like I set this head. It's like the looseness and, you know, the sexiness of hair. And I think that's very similar to what I'm doing here, you know, and I think that was a breakthrough in itself, you know. I mean, she was amazing. And I think because her face was quite different, and she was very lively and she was very open. Elizabeth Taylor, of course, you know, magnificent, terrific bone structure, beautiful hair, you know. And I think, you know, I think these girls really showed, you know, women were very powerful people, and they could be, you know, they're individual. They didn't have to have uniformity. And the biggest thing was the change from uniformity of the 50s, the early 50s, until it started loosening up, where people became individual. Like, oh, that's a Marilyn Monroe hairstyle. Oh, that's Elizabeth Taylor. So, you know, they started to create this, yes, you can be yourself. You can have your own tendencies, you know, and I think that's cool, you know. And it's started to change the whole world as we see it.
So let's talk about this, because this is the It Girl, wasn't it?
Well, this was the It Girl. And then, you see, Jean Seberg, it was an amazing actress. She was actually American. She lived in Paris. And the photograph on the right is very, very beautiful, and was really Vidal's inspiration for Rosemary's Baby many years later. And Jean Seberg had a haircut off for the part of Joan of Arc. But my dad actually translated it to like a Peter Pan thing, which became very successful and was called The It Girl. And then Jean Seberg was in Francois Truffaut's films in the sort of, you know, late 50s, early 60s, and she became very well known for being the sexy girl, you know, smoking a cigarette in bed, all that kind of stuff, with this marvelous short white blonde hair. And of course, all this is, you know, she's an iconic. Audrey Hepburn was the icon, really, and great collaborations with hairdressers in Paris, like Alexandre of Paris, who did these amazing French pleats, if you will. And, you know, it was a real transitional period for hair, for individualism. This was a wonderful short haircut. It might have been by Carita, I can't remember, but it was very exciting. Because the way they cut hair was quite different. They did this sort of backcombing, teasing hair cutting called effleurage, which in French means a very light touch. And that was exciting to me to see these things. Like, you know, it really changed. And the youth of today don't know this kind of history. So that's why it's interesting to still talk about it and to show it, you know, because it was a great emancipation of women. But, you know, it was, you know, excellence is something that's very rare, you know, and that's what it was. It was excellence, you know.
Well, when you look at those short pixie haircuts, you tend to forget that they were in the 50s, Audrey Hepburn and these iconic actresses. And then today I was thinking about Anne Hathaway when she had her hair cut off for Les Miserables.
Yeah.
And again, the pixie haircut became popular. So it's all about that right look on the right person. So let's take a look at some more footage of your father, and then we're going to get into doing some great hair.
170 years have passed since this Jasper vase was first seen. It was made by Josiah Wedgwood, the famous potter, as a tribute to Greece. Today, watched by Phyllis Bailey, a fashion editress, hairdresser French of London seeks from it a design, an idea for a modern hairstyle based on the classical line of ancient Greece. Recent hairstyles looked for inspiration to Queen Victoria. Now the ideas come from 2,000 years back. Drawn up into a neatly folded chignon, the hair is allowed to overspill at the rear, just like a horse's tail. That's where the style gets its name. It's called Pegasus, after the flying horse of mythology. See how the suggestion of width at the sides blends with the popular evening styles of the moment. Modified with the wide look, it would make an attractive style for the day.
Wow, here it is. Here we are.
So we're now going to do some hair. So clearly you can hear, guys, that I'm having an audio issue. So I'm going to be more quiet so that I don't ruin this show. We don't know what the audio problem is, but it just won't go away. I'm going to do a 1940s hairstyle, very much like this on the wall. So I did a vertical set, and I'm going to start working, and I'm going to let Nick do the talking because.
Okay, don't worry about it at all, Viv. It happens to all of us. It happened to me the other week. Funny enough, Vivian, when I first met you, and I remember you doing these asymmetric hairstyles, I thought, oh my goodness, it's so 40s, it's amazing. And you wore this hat somewhere, it was years ago. And I thought, God, you're such an iconic 40s babe, And it's very much your style. Isn't that ironical?
Yeah.
But fresh and modern, but just those whimsical looks. Oh my goodness. It's like that looks beautiful already. So what I've done here, I've actually pin curled this as per sort of 1950s. So I'm going to brush this out and see what we've got going here. I haven't done this since 1965. So it's a bit of a long time. That's when I started in this industry. So let's get her close up. And I'm going to use a Denman on it. I'm going to polish it with my Nicholas French polisher. Okay. And I'm going to use positioning pins because that's very important. Putting onto my magnetic wristband. And so we're going to do that. So I'll start off with the Denman. And Viv's working away there. It looks very beautiful already. She always has these girls in fabulous little outfits and stuff going on. So I'm going to brush their hair, and I'll start from underneath. This is a pin curl set, so it was 100% pin curls, 3 curls in each. And I'm just going to brush this through and start lifting it out. And that's how they basically did it when I remember many years ago in the salons. And they really brushed through the hair. They didn't mess about. They really brushed through it, and they got this amazing sort of silhouette to work. And you'll see how 50s it really looks. And okay, Viv, so what are you up to, Vivian? You're sort of using, let me have a look, using the dryer there, very posh dryer. You can see how that's coming, the pin curls are really lifting out.
That looks amazing. So I just was blow drying the wave in and trying to also get rid of my roller marks. So the direction is back, around, and then heat. And you can see that gives that lovely effect. I'll just go in close for 2 seconds so you can see. It's pretty cool.
That's brilliant, Vivian, because, in the early 60s, late 50s, they used to use a comb and a blow dryer to make like ridges for the ballroom dancers. And they'd take out all the kinks and whatever. That's a brilliant technique.
So I'm going to back home in a very light way and make my first piece of volume through the front. Then I'm going to back home my side, and then I'm going to do a roll in the back to create the volume. So this is all going to be about very light back homing to create this nice texture. What are you doing, Nick?
What I'm doing now is I'm just going to do the 50s look first, and then I'm going to change it to something new. So a lot of they had a thing called lacquer in the 50s. So you use positioning pins to position your hair. I'm going to show you how to do it with tiny little hairpins, because once you use the lacquer, it was there for a week. You know, I mean, you could be on the Titanic and you'd be swimming around in the sea and you'd come out with the same hairstyle. So the thing is, look, so I use positioning pins, and I'm just going to do a typically 50s sort of look. And it was like very, you know, Princess Grace and very beautiful, sexy sort of hair. But everything was pinned in before they did their lacquer, and they just used the sets, and they used combs. They did very rarely used they used tail combs a lot to work the hair. One of my dad's best friends was Sidney Gulioff, who did the hair for Greta Garbo for many years, always wonderful hairstyles. And he used a lot of lacquer and a lot of tail combs to put the hair in. So you've got these beautiful sort of shapes working. And it's all to do with, I always say with hairdressing, you know, today, it's all to do with Pat. It's, you know, patience, attitude, and technique, and to get the hair. You can see from the sides how it's sort of building. And because I pin curled at the back, I come underneath the hair to sort of really comb it through. And you can imagine yourself being in a 50s film somewhere, okay? And when you come to the top, everything's very sort of sprayed in and very, very cool. So I'm just gonna move it around, use my positioning pins to get the style. And I can just about remember my mother, Monica, having a hairdo like this all the time. Yeah, and Vivian met Mon, and she was outrageous. And she used to be at reception with these incredibly beautiful hairstyles. And I remember her one day saying, "Oh, this client was upset at my father because he changed her hair." And she said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, that man's marvelous, but he's completely mad." And she never told him it was her husband. Which I thought was brilliant. That is marvelous but mad. And that was my dad, because he did things with great beauty. And I remember the way his hands worked. And this is why I want to show you this very sort of 50s silhouette, Vivian, you know?
Yeah.
So idea of what it was really, really like, especially in the front. And when they sprayed hair with lacquer, it was real lacquer. I mean, I'm using Simelnet, which is pretty old stuff, but I love these shapes. And the fact they had setting lotions, Vivian, that were like pure alcohol, they got incredible shine to the hair. If you look at the old films, which we don't really have those setting lotions today. And
I'm using a very special brush, Nick.
Oh my God, that's great. Yeah, that's great. There you go. Nicholas French Shiner. You can get them from me. Even in the pandemic, you can order them from my website. Just call me up, because they're really good for polishing the hair. That's what I'm going to use now. I'm going to spray, and you can spray hairspray on them. When you're frightened of spraying the hair, just spray the brush and just brush and comb and clean. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful brush to work with to get your finishing touch, especially if you do photographic shoots. Very important to get the finish in the hair. It's got to do it. Don't do post. Oh, yeah, we can do it in post. No, do it so you don't have to retouch any hair. And I think that's the art of doing photographic hair, is to do it first time round beautifully. Oh my God, that was beautiful. Yeah. You notice what Viv's done? She's got some little bit of tissue paper, so it nothing marks the hair, and that's important. You know, especially when you do photographic work, to keep the hair so it's like absolutely immaculate. And we're not doing hair, oh, we do it in post. We're doing hair because we're doing it for real, you know? And, you know, when you come to working the hair, just work it and feel it. And and tease the hair and back comb it. And the reason they got these wispy pieces, and I'm going to show you that cutting technique that they used in the 50s, which is really cool. And yeah, that was beautiful, Vivian. So I'm just going to show them the cutting technique on the side. So you see, you've got a cutting technique on the side. You see this part here that's very heavy. So I've got this marvelous Sam Vila shears. Thanks, Sam, for sending them to me. We did a shout out the other week, and as a gift, he sent me these wonderful shears. And in the 50s, they teased their hair in, okay, like that, and then they cut their hair down like that. And what are they doing? They were pushing the hair in, so you had the length, but taking the weight out. So when you pull it out, you get this marvelous, wispy Marilyn Monroe ends to the hair. So I'm just going to do this side just to show you how they cut their hair. And we're going to push it in. So you're keeping the length. The hair you push in, you will retain the length. And we're going to cut it with Sam Vila's wonderful shears. And you can see how you get this beautiful, beautiful wispy ends in the hair. I want to do mine traditionally 50s. Okay, then I'll break it up and make it look very sort of fresh and modern in a minute. That's looking beautiful, Vivian. Whoever did that for you is a good hairdresser.
So what we have here is the back combing in this area directional. We have this nice voluminous effect through here, slightly nodded to the side. And I am going to be sewing this. So this is just the foundation. And in the back, it's going to roll up. So sometimes it's important to brush the hair through, and other times it's important just run with your fingers. So I'm going to brush the hair through and then continue. And I apologize for my terrible sound. So I'm going to be quiet again and I'm sorry, Nick, you're going to have to do the
Don't worry, darling, don't worry. I had that same problem. I've got a microphone coming in the post. Let me get myself modernized, you know. So, you know, the first salon I worked in was gaslit. You know, it's like I wanted people to see how these 50s looks happened. So it's all in the set, and they cut hair dry. You know, they didn't do it wet first; they cut it dry. You can see this looks like one of the stars out of some of these films. And I love the lilac color; it's beautiful. A friend of mine colored this, Doug Martucci, great friend of mine. But it reminds me of those incredible, it used to be called Rue rinses. And they had these names like, Bashful Blonde. And I had a client with totally blue hair, almost like this. When she came in, I set her hair for about 25 years. Wherever I went, she had to come. And I set it in rollers. And we had this color, I can't remember the name of it. It wasn't Bashful Blonde, but it came out absolutely blue. And it was terrifying, you know. And I always remember her husband supplied the towels for the London Underground, so it must have been worth a fortune. Anyway, so this is the cutting technique they used. You can see how it really works. And if you watch Vivian working, it's interesting because she's very sort of like, she locks everything off in the sides and she protects herself for any kind of marks in the hair by putting like a Sanex strip and a clip in there. And then she can work on the back to get that wonderful sort of 40s silhouette, which is very, very attractive. And with today's products, it's even better because in those days, it was very sort of, very sort of coarse almost. Now with the new products, it's absolutely stunning and absolutely beautiful. It's a very different finish to the hair, you know, that we get. But I want to do something more traditional, and in fact, the silhouette is very much like, I remember my mum's hair, you know, years and years ago, and she was amazing. She had all these, and Mr. Roy at my dad's salon used to do her hair in a very traditional way. And she had great actress friends who loved it, you know. You can see from the back how it's looking incredibly 50s. And I think that's an important exercise. How I push the hair in, retains the length. With my Sam Vila shears, I cut it off. Then I go through and what I get is this seamless layers in the hair. So you could use this in a modern way, you know, when people, you know, when the clients come and want 3 layers. What's that about? I've never heard of that before. And it's ridiculous. So you could actually get them to really think about, you know, reducing weight around the heads. So how are you doing, Viv? You okay? You're not having a nervous breakdown there with this sound?
No, it's actually kind of nice not to talk. Because
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm having some definite technical issues. I just want to make sure that, okay, my camera is doing something strange.
Well, don't worry, you know, I mean, I think it's...
So I'm
Yeah,
going
hairdressers love to watch people work, and they love to watch their hands work, and the different kind of, you know, it's all in the eye of the beholder. It's like when you do hair, it's, you know, I always suggest to hairdressers, you know, don't take the elevator, take the stairs. It's all about technique. And then the end result is really your own choice, because you are a brand, you're individual, you're your own master. So whatever you want to do at the end, like watching Viv, I can think of hairstyles to do, and I might do something a bit different. It's beautiful, but you know, it's given me terrific inspiration, and I think that's the important thing. It's all about the idea is the most difficult thing. It's the most difficult mountain to climb, isn't it, Viv? The idea.
Yes, the idea is the hardest thing of all. And just when you think, oh gosh, I came up with something new, it either is like, no, well, it's been done before.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, it's so new and it's so different, no one wants it. So coming up with new ideas is not easy. And you can clearly see I can't even take thread off this elastic spool here. This is the elastic that I'm going to be using for hair sewing.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
I'm going to find my end. I don't know where it is. And I'm going to drop it on the floor. I'm going to thread my needle. And I'm going to do the hair sewing. So this is a very basic shape that's 40s that I've done. And then I'm going to sew it and completely deconstruct this style because I want to bring it into today. So I've got my thread. There's my needle.
Is that a plastic needle from Michael's? One of those? Is it with a big hole in it?
Yeah, it's a big plastic needle. I'm going to knot my thread, and then I'm going to start my hair sewing so that I will have a 40 shape, but it will be much more deconstructed.
Yeah.
If this was going to be a precise roll, I would have been taking tiny sections and very neatly and meticulously making it smooth. But because I'm going to deconstruct it, that's not necessary. So I'm going to start sewing in the back. I'm going to take my needle through here. And I'm going to now thread through here.
But you can probably do a facelift with this as well, can't you?
Yeah.
You can the skin a bit and pull it back. And
yes.
But my dad did this, you know, in the 50s. It was brilliant. But he did it with a piece of leather. And he had a terrible time with it. But it was brilliant. So you put the clips in, sew it, and then take the clips out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then this is about the deconstruction of this. So it's the pulling apart of taking a structured shape and undoing the structured shape. That's the idea of this. So I'm just going to sew around this perimeter and start to really mindfully see it evolve.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
And I don't want it to droop down too low. So I'm going to hoist it up. And that's the beauty of sewing. And this is elastic thread.
I like that. Yeah. So it gives you a bit more leeway with the elastic thread, doesn't it?
Yes. And because I have back combing, I can go into my back combing and create this nice texture.
Okie dokie.
And then I'm going to do that all the way around. So what are you doing, Nick?
Well, I'm just working the front of the hair. I don't know if you can see. It's like incredibly sort of 50s. Because I've done everything. I'm using my comb there just to, I don't have my blow dryer, just wait until that sets in. And I want to start moving around because I think there's so many individual people nowadays that you can do. Like on the right girl, you can do an amazing 50s hairstyle. She look like ridiculously wonderful. And that's what I love about, the only thing I love about this era is individuality. I hate everything else about it, but if you can see how I'm using, the little fronds of hair, and I need to take more out of here as well, to build up this sort of very sort of design disorder, not just like my dad did, but I think it's cool to see how they did these hairstyles. It was insane. And there you go, look, the wispiness. So we've got very Marilyn Monroe-y.
So Nicholas, let's talk about the big influences during the 1950s, because it was coming out of the war, where fashion was obviously lower on the list of priorities because of the war. And then from that, this whole new way of designing hair, the fashion that was all new. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, because, like my dad came out of the war in 1946, and he rented his salon out, Vivian. So he came out of the war at that period, and he wanted to do something different. And he worked out in the Royal Air Force by cutting the wives' hair, of the Air Force officers and stuff, and experimenting. A much freer way of doing hair. It wasn't all sort of, strict. So he wanted to loosen up what he called casual hairdressing. And what he found out was that not many people liked that idea. Until one client came and said, I think it's the most avant-garde thing I've ever seen. And women are sick of looking the same as they did in the Second World War. They wanted to reinvent themselves and look fresh and be fun and go out and look fantastic and drink cocktails and smoke cigarettes. And that's what the era was about, And like my mother was a great instigator with my dad, before the war. He had his little salon, and he had the Danish girlfriend who soon disappeared after my mother had finished with her. And my mother said to my dad, you've got to wear handmade clothes. You've got to look like somebody. You've got to do something special. And your hairstyles are boring. You need to do something different. And so he did. So he experimented, and he did different ways of cutting, different ways of setting. And people recognized him. Somebody from Vogue came and said, oh, my goodness, this guy's a sort of Diaghilev of hair. Diaghilev was a very avant-garde dancer. He said, this is the future of hairdressing. And then the woman from Marks and Spencer's, which is a big department store group in those days, came in 1947. And my dad only had 3 clients a day. He wasn't doing anything. Said, and he permed her hair and cut it. And she came back the next day and said, oh, she hates her perm. And she said, no, I love it. Can you do 200 people a month? So my dad said, yeah, my staff are just on holiday. You can come back. I can do 200 hairstyles a month. So the whole of Marks and Spencer's, all these stores, have these girls with beautiful, loose, sexy hair. Oh, where do you get your hair done? French of London. In this tiny salon. So people were sitting on his stairs for his 10-seater salon, right the way down the stairs to Regent Street, because, that's the only place to get that done. Where it was loose, it was fresh, it was sexy, and it was fun. And Dad did it with his cutting techniques. And also, the big one, Vivian, was after the war, it was like red hair, black hair, or bleached hair. And Dad watered down hair color so you can get amazing pink tones and amazing lavenders and amazing this. He took all the mirrors off his salon wall, and he styled people's hair, and he charged 3 guineas, £3, 3 shillings. It was a lot of money. And nobody found out for 2 years how he did it. And that's how he built his business up, opened up the big, Curzon Street salons and everything else. The Curzon Street salon was like amazing, And so that's how he basically broke through, by being very avant-garde. And they love the pink hair. They love, I got pictures of him in Vogue magazine. The model he did with the pink hair looks absolutely stunning. Never been seen before, never.
So do you think that your father's success was because he was so revolutionary?
Yeah. I mean, I know for a fact, I had the appointment book when he was doing 3 or 4 clients a day. And he said to my mother, let's go to the cinema and have a fabulous meal in this restaurant I know, because tomorrow we're finished. We have 3 shillings and 6pence and nobody likes what I do. I think I should do something else. I've got to pack it in. And they went out. And then ironically, the next day, the woman from Marks and Spencer's came in, ironically, the next day. And the rest is history.
Wow.
So that terrible brink of post-war doom and despair, because he had courage. This woman said, it's the best thing I've ever... I went in, my boss said, I want all the staff, 300, 400 staff, I want them all to wear the same kind of looks, fresh, modern hair. Not dissimilar to what I'm doing now. So, you know, it was touchable, it was movable, it had volume, it was sexy, and it was new, and it was fresh in that period of time, okay? Because of the cutting technique, which is the one I'm ironically using. I know this looks sort of dated, but the beauty of this is what it was about, you know? This is,
wow.
this in those days was like ridiculously new, because you felt that you could actually touch your girlfriend's hair. You know, it wasn't one of those things where, oh, I can't touch the hair because it's full of like very strong hairspray. It was something that was just indicative of the time. It was sexy, it was mad, it was crazy, and also it had dimension. And that's what it's really about. And you know, Dad's cutting technique, from being a barber when he cut the hair as it moved, was very, very new. Nobody had ever done that. You can see how I'm putting the hair out and I'm moving it up. And I'm graduating the hair. Graduating means gradually cutting the hair, okay? And that's what Dad did, because he was a barber. So he cut hair very barber-esque fashion, but in a very fresh, beautiful, soft looks into the hair. So, and like, remember when you did that shingle the other week, Vivian? He did that with curly hair, and you got this amazing light effect, if you can see here, everybody. You just go through and take the very ends off, and you get this amazing sort of silhouette at the back of the hair. By pulling the hair down, and then we're going for graduation, just taking the ends off the hair to make it light and airy. And, you know, practice on a mannequin, but I tell you what, it's great to go backwards, and it gives you inspiration for the future. I think that's important. Don't you, Vivian? You know, what you've done there is spectacular.
Yes, I do.
Really looking into the past to have aspiration and inspiration for tomorrow and today.
So you can see that we've got it open here, our little palm, our classic roll, which is like this half of a page boy, all the hair sewing, which gives you these lovely valleys and peaks, and all the texture. So it's a little bit rawer than that period of time, and the set being vertical gives that nice movement, so it's not too flat to the head. So that's my look. So are you done with yours, Nicholas?
Yeah, I could go on forever. You know me, but
Well,
I just love the sort of Marilyn Monroe sexiness of it, and you know, you can break this up and make it look very modern if you want to, but I think it's sort of cool because this is a technique. Nothing has been done here. There's not a 1950s technique. The way I cut it, the way I set it, the way I did it. So everything else, I mean, it's, you know, you might think it was a bit drag queeny, but even the way we cut it, I cut it like my dad cut hair, which is through the air, you know? So I think it's important to revisit, and then you can, you know, have fun with it yourself and do whatever you want to do. But I wanted to do it from the beginning to the end as they did it.
okay.
And I think it's quite an interesting feel. And the colour is very indicative of what Dad did with his watered down hair colour. You know?
Yeah.
Which is brilliant.
So I'm going to go to a full screen so you can actually take some pictures of this. And let's just get her there. And you can see that in the background is the inspiration. So that is the 1940s look.
Beautiful.
With the hair sewing.
I love the hair sewing in it, Viv, because that makes it really modern and fresh. And you can pull it out and do different things with it.
So that's the look. And of course, it's always watching for the balance and proportion. So if you've enjoyed today, which I hope you have in spite of our technical challenges, please share with your friends. Do you like the retro? Have you seen some things here that you could apply to your work? I hope so. And well, what else can I say? I feel like it's hard to talk with my microphone going so weird. But anyway, Nick, you're done. You want to give a little tour for everybody? Little spin around.
Yeah,
So we
okay,
can-
yeah, sorry, I didn't see it. We'll whizzer around. But this is the real silhouette, the sort of 50s. They combed it around, but it had a lot of energy in it. And once you put your fingers through it, it's amazing how modern this can get. You can see how, look, wow, just when I'm doing that, it super changes the whole feel of it. But because of this kind of cutting technique, it's very, very, very cool, very different and cool and whatever. And I love it. You know, it's inspired me to actually, I've never done this before.
It's
I haven't
gorgeous.
done this yet for a long, long time since I was an apprentice. So that was an interesting experience.
It's really
And,
beautiful.
You know, it's just, they were so clever in those days, what they did to really work it out, you know?
Absolutely.
And, you know, I'm here actually at the moment in Palm Springs, and I'm hoping to do, and I've got people coming, believe it or not, a few people, very small groups this weekend for some training. And what I've found is everybody wants to do one-on-ones, because we've been sort of testing, we're very careful with the pandemic, and we'd love to do one-on-one, especially with NAHA coming up and everything else. So anybody's interested, get hold of us, and you know, we've got to start working again and working towards building this industry back up again. It's been a very tough time, hasn't it, Viv? So
Absolutely. So do check out Nicholas French's website, and do check out his hashtag Instagram, and you can see his beautiful work. And also, just to remind you, this is where Nicholas is right now at Skyfall, and that's where he's hosting some of his education. So again, please do check that out. And we're going to now go to some really cool footage, and we're going to come back in a few moments to take some questions from you. So if you've got questions, now's your chance.
The Fashion Camera visits Darien, Connecticut for a day with a suburban housewife. A sheerly lovely suburban housewife, that is. Our heroine's morning is spent in a smartly striped play and work suit with trim skirt and jacket worn over it when friend neighbor drops in for luncheon. Friend neighbor wears flower patterned shirt and skirt of Mexican linen, also chic and suburban. Comes cocktail time and housewife turns glamour girl in this at-home costume designed by Tina Lesser. Glamour girl is a gourmet too. For a dinner party, she's a hostess, handsomely gowned with a bouffant skirt over her earlier costume. Sheer informal elegance is the keynote. Friend neighbor is dazzling in a gown of Pima cotton with paisley top by Oleg Cassini. And that's our fashion story of a day in the suburbs. Anyone for Darien?
So I'm going to bring our beautiful Rosemary in, and she's been fielding the questions that have been coming in. So let's just go to a threesome here. Rosemary, welcome.
Hello, everyone. So we have a few
So
questions.
Rosemary, what are the big yes, and what was your big learn, apart from the fact that my microphone is absolutely awful?
The biggest learn is the importance of learning from the past to interpret the future. And
Yes.
how you both do it so beautifully and gracefully.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Nick. You did a great job. Thank you. So any questions from our friends here at Facebook and on YouTube as well?
The questions I see are from Anna. She asked, do you suggest the elastic should color the model's hair, like match the model's hair?
Great question. Thank you. If you want to hide it, yes, match. And you can use embroidery silk. But if you want to make a statement, you can use leather, and you can do bold or contrasting colors, and it can be amazing.
Great, thank you. And Amy Jo Richards wants to know, what favorite products do you use for foundational setting? Oh my goodness, sorry.
You couldn't get any more real today. Nicholas, what do you like to use for your sets when it's a dry set?
I use like a mousse, a strong mousse on it or something like that on dry hair. And then I just set it, like this was set in Pinkos on a mousse and dry hair. So, basically, because it was 50s, I did it with just like a generic sort of mousse I bought somewhere. And it gives it that sort of raw look. And I like it, but put it on dry hair, don't put it on wet hair, because you get that 80s look, you don't want that. So you put it on dry hair, which is nice. And perhaps use a bit of a cream through the hair, just to really make it, just take the edge off it afterwards. Okay.
And I used Orbei's soft lacquer on my mannequin for a dry iron set.
That's cool. Yeah.
Wonderful. And the last thing is a question you asked earlier, is how many of you love retro? And you had a very large hands up, clap, applause to the ideas.
Cool. Excellent. Well, I want to just say a huge thank you to you all for being with us today. Apologies for my technical challenges. I have a great microphone, but I don't know what it's doing. Nicholas, thank you so much for sharing
my pleasure, Vivian.
your wisdom with us. It's an honor to see you and your father's work. It's such an inspiration. So I thank you. And I just want to remind everyone, you can check out Nicholas's work and book him for events go to Nicholas's website at Nicholas French. Yeah. And he's currently at Skyfall, but he does also host events in the Hamptons. So do check that out. And take advantage of some private time with this incredible master, because it's just so wonderful to learn the real deal. And Rosemary, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Rosemary, for everything, darling. We love you.
Yeah.
I love you too, both.
And guys, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with our nod to the 60s and the 70s. And again, we will go.
Very exciting.
Yeah, and we'll show you some pretty amazing stuff. So thank you so much. Take care, be safe, and bye for now.
Take care. Love you all. Take care.